This is a really important gateway conversation into a conversation that's actually a little bit deeper and more important, which is how do we continue to show up for ourselves in a way that feels really impactful and really important as we go through our healing journey. I like to call the healing journey a becoming journey. I got that from Dr. Joe Dispenza, because what we find in the healing journey is that it feels like a unraveling, but it really, and it is an unraveling, but it's also, it's more so a becoming of the next version of yourself that's going to be more aligned and more authentic. So even when it feels like everything is falling apart, that is part of the journey and part of the process, but it means that you're becoming a different version of yourself. And relationships and this discussion around boundaries is so important because your relationships in your life are the one of the most important tools for self-actualization. And what that means is that when you engage in any relationship in your life, and in particular the relationships of your family of origin, that means that you have an opportunity, you've chosen, your soul has chosen this experience so that you can learn something, so that you can get closer to who you really are. Who you really are is pure love, but there's a lot of layers on top of that that we need to navigate in order to get to that pure space. That could also be thought of as the place of enlightenment or high frequency vibration or a state of peace. It's all the same, and it's where we are all trying to get to. So self-actualization is becoming the best version of yourself, and the truth is you never really get there because you're constantly moving closer to it, because you're constantly moving closer to a state of love, a state of peace. So I think that that's what's really important to understand about relationships, is that they're a learning tool. They are one of the best ways that we have to learn about ourselves, because they present to you the exact lessons that you need to learn. And the tension within our relationships of origin in particular, so it means your parents, siblings, other people that you grew up with, the tension within those relationships and the challenge and the triggers are actually the best way for us to understand what the lesson is. So when you do feel yourself triggered, it's really important to pay attention, because the trigger is the path to the lesson, the thing that will actually get you closer to peace. I know that a lot of these relationships, in particular for those of us on the spiritual path or on this healing journey, our relationships of origin often feel like the ones that cause us the most anxiety. And it's true. That's by design. That's not, I'm not here to invalidate that experience. I'm saying that that's exactly the experience, ironically, that's going to get you to the place of peace. Why? Because when you experience so much anxiety, which is another term for suffering, which is another term for fear, when you experience that to such a degree that you really can't hold it anymore, it will encourage you, it'll push you to find new solutions, because you need to find a new way of being. You need to find a new way of existing. And so it's the tension that actually drives you to seek for solutions. So that's also why it's really important. It's part of the thing that we signed up for when we got here, when we came here as humans, is we signed up for this challenging path where we come in and we forget all the reasons that we decided to come here, and we forget the things that we decided that we would learn, and we get all this socialization piled on top of us, so that at some point in our journey we can peel those things back and come back to the truth of who we are, which is pure love, pure light. But the human experience means that we also have this really interesting spectrum of emotions that we experience, and we need to understand what to do with those. The high vibration emotions are easy. Those are the ones that we all want: love, peace, joy, gratitude, excitement, passion. Those are the ones that we really want to stay with, right? The low vibration emotions like anger and sadness and guilt, shame, fear, overwhelm, confusion, all these ones that we don't know what to do with, we try to avoid. But it's exactly in learning, and this is where the solution seeking comes in, because what we're actually looking for is we're looking for what to do with those, what to do with the low vibration emotions that we don't know what to do with. Thank you, my dears. Yes, and I see, thank you so much, Emily, for the gift. And please do like and share the live, my dears. So what we're actually looking for, even when we talk about boundaries, even when we talk about family of origins, even when we talk about relationships, what we're asking is what to do about the relationship, but what we're really asking is what to do about those low vibration emotions. How do we navigate that? What do we do with that? How do we exist within that? How do we exist with the experience where those exist? And what do we do? I think everybody kind of wants to know, what do we do with these? And so that's my entire goal, and my passion is to fill that gap, because we know that we don't have to stay in those low vibrations, or hopefully you know that you don't have to stay in those low vibrations, but what do we do to get ourselves out of it? That's actually the key to pretty much everything in life. Is if you know how to get yourself from low vibration to high vibration, then you've unlocked the key to life. Because then no matter what happens externally around you that might trigger you, you know how to get yourself back up. The next level after that is not even getting triggered in the first place. And that's a little bit higher level, right? But the first level is learning the skills so that when we do fall, we get ourselves back up. So please do ask your questions, my dears, or let me know your boundaries. Okay, T. Cherie said that my kids love books that can be shared. How do I toe the line between sharing and boundaries, special items? I'm not sure I fully understand. Can you explain that a little bit more? It seems like it's a good thing that they like to share, if I'm understanding that correctly. Yeah, that's a great second question, my dear. And we'll talk about that. There's a specific practice that I teach that's all about it's called feeling a feeling. So basically the gap is we don't know what to do with the hard feelings, right? We don't know what to do with the fear or shame or guilt or sadness or fear. Did I say fear? Anger. Those are kind of the big ones. So there's a few different practices, and really what we need to do is to start creating new practices. I call them practices because they must be practiced regularly. So that's also the key. And a lot of people don't want to make the time to actually create new practices. And actually, I'm going to mention one thing before we go on to do the practice, which we can do that today. The thing that I want to mention is that if you really want to stay in a state of high vibration, if you want to stay in a state where you feel at peace, where you don't feel fear, where you don't feel anger, where you don't feel sadness, all of those hard emotions, then you are going to actually need to change your decision-making processes, the things that you choose to do, the things that you choose to spend your time on a regular basis. And what I mean by that is we need to start to choose our peace in small ways. That means that we cannot choose to watch news that gets us into a low vibration. We cannot choose to scroll through social media and watch things that put us in a state of fear or in a state of anger. I think a lot of things in our world right now are really politicized, and we're really encouraged to take a side politically, at least here in the US where I am. And this is extremely, extremely dangerous. This is actually the opposite of what your soul wants, which your soul wants peace, right? You want to work towards a state of high vibration peace. If you're constantly feeding your consciousness, your brain with messages of hate, messages of anger, messages about all the things that are going wrong in the world and in the country, then you're not going to get to peace. It's in direct conflict with you experiencing a state of peace. So I say this because it's something that I think is really, really widely, it's a really wide reaching problem right now, because people say they want peace, but they feel a sense of hatred towards the people that they think are creating suffering. So they want peace, but they are hating on the people that they think create unpeace. But the problem there is that, do you see how that's in direct conflict? You're never going to actually get to the state of peace if you stay in a state of low vibration, anger, or fear, and continue to put your focus on all the things that you think are wrong with the world, all the things that you think the other side is doing wrong, right? And I'll come back to some of the comments. Yes, AJ, it really is about frequency and vibrations. You're right. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So, so we need to start being really mindful of those things. And it can be hard to make some of those decisions because sometimes we identify so much with a certain ideology that we cling so tightly to it. And that's why a different ideology feels so threatening. But you've got to love yourself more than the amount. How do I say this? The love for yourself has to be more than your desire to hold on to anger. That's the only way I can say it. Talk to her, I look like your mother. Well, maybe that's a sign. So, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to be focused on. Do you love yourself enough to give up that anger? Oh, TikToker, I see. She was batshit crazy. Well, you know what? Maybe it's an opportunity for you to rewrite some of that experience with your mother, with somebody that looks like her. So let me know if you guys have questions as I'm speaking. But that's what I want to say to begin with. Before we kind of go into any of the conversations around how to raise your vibration. And again, the raising your vibration piece, it's a constant thing. It's an everyday thing. It's not like I'm not going to teach you one thing and then that's the thing that you do to raise your vibration, then you're just there. I think the misconception is that we constantly seek peace and then we try to stay at a high vibration. The truth is that we are naturally high vibration beings. The socialization, the conditioning that's piled on top of us since birth is what teaches us something different. And so peeling back those layers, which also means digging through a lot of the anger and the hatred and the fear and the grief and all of those hard things. But what we really need to get good at is not staying up here. It's actually getting really good at getting ourselves back up. So when we fall, we know how to get ourselves back up. Then we fall again and we get ourselves back up. And every time we fall just a little higher, right? Like first we fall really low. Then we fall like a little bit higher and then we get back up. And then we fall a little bit higher and then we actually go higher. So it's like you are going up. You are raising your vibration, but the point is not that you're staying up here the whole time. You actually are empowered in that you know how to support yourself through the lows. So, oh, Sierra, yeah, I was just telling my grandparents that I haven't watched the news in years. That's amazing. And I'm sure you feel so much better, do you not? Because I know I do. And sometimes when I like actually start like watch the news or slip up, I kind of feel that. I'm like, oh, I don't like engaging with that. Uh, okay. Are you supposed to tell people what your boundaries are or just put up the flag when they happen? That's a great question, Rock Girl. So both. It depends on what you decide to do. I would say that, well, first of all, setting a boundary doesn't require that you tell the other party anything. Because if we go back to the prompt here, boundaries are promises to yourself, they're not rules for other people. So because they actually don't involve the other person, they only involve you, you don't have to tell them anything, technically. And to give you an example, the boundary is not don't call me after 9 p.m. The boundary is I don't pick up the phone after 9 p.m. The boundary is not I no, the boundary is not don't raise your voice at me. The boundary is when someone raises their voice at me or when this person raises their voice at me, I end the conversation. I leave. And then the only thing that you need to do to honor the boundary is keep that promise to yourself. A lot of times we think of boundaries as like this person needs to honor my boundary. No, because if you're putting your peace in somebody else's hands, then you're actually never going to be at peace. And this again goes to like the vibration thing, right? If we're trying to achieve high vibration, which also, this is really freedom. Like when we're up here, I think really what people want is the experience of freedom in their lives and in every way, in every capacity, they want freedom. And freedom means that nothing controls you. And if you are setting rules for other people, then what happens is you start to monitor whether they're following your rules. And then the second they don't follow your rule, oh, look, you've fallen into anger and resentment. So what we don't want to do is mix up the concepts of boundaries and rules, because if you're setting rules, then you are setting yourself up for suffering because you're simply giving your power away in a different way. You're allowing something external to you to control how you feel. So the boundary only needs to be communicated with you and you, but I would say that within the journey of becoming the next version of yourself, it is also very important to learn how to speak your truth. And that's a very messy journey, but it's a worthwhile one. And I say messy because you're gonna make mistakes and it's gonna feel really uncomfortable at times. Other people are going to make mistakes. They're gonna show up in a really messy fashion because they're not used to you speaking in the way that you are when you tell them what you hope for their behavior and for the future. So, you can ask people for a change in behavior. Sure, you can say, hey, please don't raise your voice at me. Hey, please don't call me after 9 p.m. But doesn't mean that those people are going to do that. But it's an important practice in your own journey of becoming the most powerful version of yourself, because it helps you to remove the fear of speaking your truth. When you speak the truth, especially to the people that it's the most scariest to say it to. And that's oftentimes our family of origin, our parents, our siblings. So And so, Sherry, okay, what I think if you're talking about your kids, I think it's a little bit different than the boundary conversation, to be honest with you, because it sounds to me like you are, you know, you are considering like what is an appropriate like parental rule, and rules are important for children. Um, so it's a little bit different than the boundary conversation, which is really meant for adults. Um, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to help you with that unless I'm not understanding the situation clearly. But I think that that would probably be more of a question for like a somebody that's more expert in childhood behavior. I'm just trying to catch up on the comments here. Sierra perfectly said, thank you, my dear. And T Sherry, you're welcome. I'm so glad that was helpful. At least, you know, the first part of what I said. I know I probably can't answer your question to the full extent about your kids. Okay, Rock Girl, my boundaries are disrespect and treating me like I can't see through your BS. Okay, so, and that's not a boundary, and I hope you understand why, given what I've just explained, because boundaries are not about saying, like, you can't treat me that way. That's not a boundary. A boundary is saying, if this happens, then this is what I do. Or actually, there's two kinds of boundaries. Let me also explain the reason we even have boundaries, okay? Because it's also really important to understand why this is all important. I started off this whole live by saying that relationships are one of the greatest tools for self-actualization. They're one of the greatest tools that we have to become the best, most powerful versions of ourselves. And it's probably not in the way that you think. It's tends to be that it's in a way that you didn't expect, but that's why you seek for new tools and new solutions so that you can become the most powerful version of yourself. And I say this all the time because it's so important that you understand that the people that trigger you the most have the most to teach you because they're the ones that push you the farthest outside of this high vibration piece, right? The people that trigger you the most, typically your family of origin, or like potentially exes or things like that. But you don't necessarily always have to keep in touch with them unless you have kids, but so that could be resonant. But typically, even that type of situation stems back from family of origin stuff. So family of origin, parents, siblings, or other people that you grew up with, even extended family, they are the people that tend to trigger you the most. And so the reason it's so important to focus on mastering your piece around those particular individuals is because they're the ones that you fall the lowest to, right? They're the ones that make you the angriest. They're the ones that scare you the most to speak your truth to. And so those people have the most power over you simply because of that. And so we need to get to a place where we are focused more on our experience of our life, our experience of our relationship with them, and that we seek the tools so that they cannot affect us in that way. Because think about how much more powerful it is to be around that person, to have them do that same triggering behavior or say that same triggering thing. Nothing changed, but that you're completely unaffected by it. That is way more powerful than you just cutting them out and never seeing them again. Because when you cut somebody out of your life for good because you can't stay in a state of peace around them. And I said it that way specifically. It's not that they keep doing this thing that makes you feel anxious. That's how we tend to look at it. But really, the truth is, you can't stay in a state of peace around them. When you cut them out because of that, it means that you're scared of them because they have power to affect you. They control you. So the intention, and I said this earlier too, the first step is to figure out what to do when we are triggered. When we go low, how do we get ourselves back up? Step one, right? We're taking this step by step because that's a compassionate way to teach ourselves these new skills. And then second level is to teach ourselves how to not even dip low at all, how to stay up here. But we need to start at step one because it's a lifelong skill that you'll need. You probably won't ever get to a place where you never dip, but you're going to just dip lower and not for nearly as long. So Rock Girl, think about how to reimagine what you've stated so that it's actually a boundary. Sierra, I've learned that I need to feel the anger to process it. Exactly, especially when it comes to trauma. That's a really incredible point. So, yeah, I would say that my YouTube channel, so there's 3 practices that I teach that are the main practices, which are the feeling of feelings practice, that's foundational, and then feeling anger and rage, which is different. And that those 2 are really important to when you go low to get yourself back up high, right? So those I would start there. And then there's a practice that I have that is about energy protection. That's about keeping your energy up here. But I am curious, Sierra, how do you feel your anger? Because I have the practice that I teach, but I'm curious as to how do you feel it? How do you process it? Sherry, I get what you are saying, but I just saw it as an opportunity to teach boundaries. I think I'm gonna have to think on that a little bit more. It's a really interesting question when it comes to kids, because I am not an expert on children or raising children or anything like that. So that's a really interesting question that I think I'm gonna have to ponder a little bit, like how to use that as a teaching moment in terms of teaching boundaries. I think that no matter what, though, you would have to be teaching them agency over self. So it's not about creating, let's say, a rule. And I'm just kind of just speaking up to what's coming up. I'm not insinuating that you think anything that I'm going to say. I'm just trying to kind of give the whole picture of what's coming to my mind right now. What you probably don't want to do is, if you're teaching boundaries, because I would consider myself a teacher of boundaries, but I'm not a teacher of childhood development. So take this however you might want to take it, but boundaries are about agency over self. So it's not about enacting a rule that like both children follow and then like we follow the rule, right? It's about teaching the children, and it might have to be an individual lesson, because a child being able to understand, like, I can't always control how the other child or the other children react, or the way, or what they choose to do or what they choose to say, but I can choose what I do in response. And I don't know how old your children are either, so I don't know what an age appropriate kind of scenario or lesson would be there, but maybe something for you to also just think about as you do think about this, because the boundaries really are about, what am I going to do? So helping them work through maybe what they could do differently in response to something not going their way. And this kind of brings me back to the reason why we have boundaries, because boundaries are, I think people try to like people kind of try to like create this boundary conversation that like blow it up into spaces where it's not appropriate, or into perspectives that are not aligned with what boundaries actually are. And by that I mean that boundaries are for are really, really good for people that they're meant for people who you want to keep in your life. So, you know, all this conversation about cutting people out of our lives and stuff, it's not really appropriate, because if you're cutting somebody out of your life, you don't really need a boundary. You're not interacting with them. And I'm not a proponent of people cutting other people out of their life. I think it causes more suffering when you cut out a parent or a sibling rather than decide to change the relationship by making your empowered decisions about how you want to show up in the relationship. Because the whole reason why we enact a boundary is because we want to keep the relationship, and we want to keep it in a way that feels healthy for us, that feels supportive for us. So enacting a boundary is really an extreme expression of love towards yourself first, and secondly towards the relationship that you're enacting the boundary within. And a boundary always entails creating more space and distance with someone. So it is interesting because it's a real act of love, self-love, and love for the other person. And at the same time, inherently within the boundary, you're moving away from each other, but in a way that's very necessary to give both people space. So it's interesting that such an impactful act of love actually means taking space from each other. You deciding to take space, you deciding to take access away, you taking access to yourself away from the other person. That's inherent within the boundary. And there's two kinds of boundaries. One is the boundary that I stated earlier, which is like, if I don't answer calls after 9 p.m. or when this person raises their voice at me, I leave. Right? These are kind of one type of boundary. That's like a boundary for when something happens, when the trigger happens, or when something happens, I do this. The other type is like a preemptive boundary, deciding in what context you want to engage with people, deciding how long you want to be in the presence of certain people. And it's different for every person in your life, for every relationship. So for example, somebody in your life, maybe you only want to see once a year. And even that once a year, you want to keep it to 30 minutes. So you're going to go to the family party for 30 minutes and then you're gone. Or you only see them in group settings. You're not going to go over to this person's house, have a one-on-one conversation with them, or you don't answer the phone when they call because you don't talk to them over the phone. Maybe you just text with them. There's a ton of ways in which you can start to take more control over how you feel within a relationship. Because can you see how empowering that is when you start to be like, this is what I do with this person? The hard part is when you do start making those different decisions, you're going to feel probably guilt and fear, because you're probably going to be afraid that that person's going to blow up at you or leave you. It's going to trigger a lot of the deeper wounds in you. And you're probably going to also feel their feelings, which, you know, they might feel confused, they might feel angry or upset, anxious. Like they're not going to understand why you're making this decision, why you've changed how you're interacting with them. And that's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's the truth of the experience of setting boundaries, is that it is uncomfortable for a period of time. And then that period of time passes. And you get really comfortable because you start to feel really empowered that you can make these changes. And as long as you are doing your best to be honest with yourself and to also be kind to them, this is not a situation where we're like doing this all resentfully and like, well, they did this, so I'm not. This is why it's actually really important that it goes along with the practice of feeling feelings, because as you do go through this process of setting boundaries, like I said, it's gonna trigger a lot of your own deep wounding, probably some people pleasing stuff that you've been doing, and like now you're like not people pleasing, so you're scared and they're upset, and so it's gonna trigger a lot of your own wounds, and you need a practice to be able to navigate those hard feelings that are coming up. It's critical. They go hand in hand, the two things. You can't really you can't really do this process of empowering yourself through boundary setting if you don't have a practice for feeling all the hard feelings that come up. But eventually you do get to a place where you feel really empowered because you really realize how much power you do have. And then all of those examples that I stated, you know, whether you only see that person once a year or for a certain amount of time, whether you talk to them over the phone or just text, like all of these things are just promises to yourself. So it doesn't require them to do anything differently. It doesn't even matter if they call you, you just don't answer the phone. It doesn't matter if they invite you over other times during the year, you just don't go over, you know? Politely decline. But again, we're trying to be as kind as possible in this, but we also don't need to over explain. Okay, let me see what comments I have to catch up on. Thank you, West Side. Haiti. Okay. T Sherry, that's helpful. It's just something that I've been thinking about regarding modeling teaching boundaries. Yeah, honestly, my dear, I think that the absolute best thing you can do is be the model. The best way that any human being is ever going to learn the skills is if you're modeling it. If you're modeling that you're doing that in the relationships in your life, then your children will watch that and learn from it. If you're modeling that you're giving yourself space to feel all of your hard feelings, then your children will model that. It's more so, I would say, about you modeling and teaching it rather than you having to explicitly teach them anything. Hey, Purple Hearts. Okay, Purple Hearts, we have discussed this before, I know. How do I extract myself from an unhealthy, abusive friendship? They keep calling, texting desperately. I know we talked about getting yourself some more support, so I hope that you've been doing that. And then also, I would say you have hard feelings to feel, and I can tell by the way that you have phrased that it's abusive. If you feel like somebody's being abusive to you, inherently within that, you are not setting the proper boundaries, and you need to decide what other boundaries you want to set with this person, because clearly you feel like they have some sort of control over you. And again, within that, feeling of feelings. Do the feeling of feelings practice to feel all the things that are coming up. It's not about like extracting yourself. If you feel like you need to extract yourself, then it's time to get really serious about boundaries. Oh, hey, Green Tea Shot, my dear. Thank you for being here. And yeah, you're late, but I'll post this. I'm going to post this live on my YouTube, so you can go back and watch it if you want. Let me know what other questions y'all have on the topic. And thank you so much for all of your engagement. And please do like and share the live. Hold on a second. Um, okay, Purple Hearts. Yeah, all this time I have been trying boundaries, but decided I need no contact now. Okay. So then that's good, that you've decided that. My question is, do I explain my goodbye? Or that's your decision, my darling. That is not something I can answer for you. As I have said, and I know you know, boundaries are promises to yourself, not rules for other people, so you don't need to tell anybody your boundary. I guess technically cutting someone out is not a boundary. So it's up to you. I think you need to decide whether we've talked about this before, but like, what is this other person capable of? But the most important thing is that you do what's right for you and then feel your feelings about that. Because you might still have guilt that comes up. You might still have fear that comes up. And that's yours to work through. Whether you talk to them about it or not, those things are probably still going to be present. I have worked hard to address my issues as a mom. I have worked and gained a better relationship with my daughter. That's great. My husband refuses to work on his relationship and holds grudges. Yeah, that is hard, my dear. Um, the only thing, first of all, I commend you for working on yourself and your own issues as it relates to your daughter. I think that's incredibly beautiful and incredibly healing, probably for both of you. I would say that he is nasty in all of it, and all of it never admits his issues. So it sounds like perhaps you have hard feelings toward your husband right now because you use the word nasty. So I think you've got to. Okay, bye, bye, Miss Sherry. Thank you so much for being here, my dear. I hope it was helpful. I want to leave but now have cancer. I want my home. Yes, I want home gone. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm sending you so much love. Oh, you want him gone. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, my dear, I'm just sending you so much love. Um, if you don't know Dr. Joe Dispenza, look up Dr. Joe Dispenza and his work. I'm just saying this as an aside, by the way. This is just like a separate thing. In case it's of interest to you, I recommend basically to anybody, especially anybody going through health issues, to look up Dr. Joe Dispenza because he has hundreds of testimonials, and I've used his meditations that are incredibly powerful. And they've transformed my life and my perspective of things in a way that I couldn't ever explain fully. But I also know that he's had tons of people that have done his meditations and done his work that have healed themselves of so many things. Here's the other thing, my dears, like the interesting thing about humans, and I talk, today I've been talking a lot about frequency, vibration, but the frequency up here, the frequency of peace, the frequency of freedom, love, joy, light, this is all healing frequency. So when we stay up here, or when we're up here for more of the time, when our dominant frequency is high, it doesn't mean that doesn't mean that we don't dip. We will probably always dip to some degree into, anger, fear, sadness, things like that. But we don't stay there very long because our dominant frequency is high. Once we learn the skill of having a high dominant frequency, that's a healing frequency. So what that also means is that sickness isn't compatible with high frequency. So, Dr. Joe Dispenza has so many testimonials on his website. I know at least one person personally who also has done his meditations and been changed by them. That he's had people that have like stage 4 cancer, people that have had, been a really people that have, been paralyzed. And it sounds kind of like fake, like like a magic thing, but really it is kind of magic, because we are magic and we can heal ourselves. And that's the thing that the systems that we're a part of, they don't want us to know, is that we actually do have the ability to heal ourselves. And so I highly recommend his work. You can look him up, Doctor, and then Joe, Joe, and then Dispenza, Dispenza. Yes, Friday Dog, the mind is such a connection to the spirit, I believe. Exactly. So what we're doing when we stay at a high frequency is we're actually connecting in with our spirit, which can only be high vibration. There is no low vibration in the spirit world. So it's like, or when we are in spirit. So, the intention is to teach you how to reach that vibration. But let me also just say another thing. So I would highly recommend anybody looking up his work. It's life-changing. He has retreats and things like that as well that he does throughout the year. I've never been to one, but I've done his work from home, and it's incredible. He has books and things too. However you choose to interact, follow your intuition on that. But I will also say that his work combined with the work that I did, that I was taught, and now that I teach, have had to go hand in hand together, because um, one of the biggest takeaways that you find with his work is that we do have the capacity to stay at high vibration for most of our life existence. We do have the capacity to heal ourselves from diseases, and to heal our body, and to heal our relationships. And in my opinion, the thing that is missing is the tool to get from the low vibration up to the high vibration. And that's what I teach. Because Dr. Joe Dispenza never tells you to not feel your feelings. And, like, people have asked him, okay, great. Like, what do I do with the heart emotion when it comes up? And his thing is like, you have to feel it. But he doesn't talk about how. And that's why I am so passionate about this, because I actually talk about the how. What do we actually do with it? And that's the tools, that's the practices that I teach. You can check out my YouTube. I have 3 main practices: feeling of feelings practice, feeling anger and rage practice, and the energy protection practice. And they really should go in that order. So you can take a look at those. I don't know if we'll do feeling of feelings tonight. Maybe we'll see how it goes. But what I also want to say, especially for you, my dear, Friday Dog, I think, right? Yes. Okay. Is that the best thing you can do? And I know that you are, well, you know that you have cancer. You know that there's this health issue that is probably taking up a lot of space in a lot of mental power, a lot of emotional power, I would imagine. Dr. Dispenza also talks about overcoming fear, even while you have a really challenging diagnosis. And I would say, and his medium is through meditation. But I would say for me and for a lot of people, the meditation works because I've done it, but I also needed some other practice, which was I needed a way to actually feel the fear and to not hang on to the fear. And I needed a way to feel the anger and to not hold on to the anger, to pass it within minutes, not sit with it for days. And that's feeling of feelings and feeling anger and rage practice that I have available. There's free, by the way. And you can also feel free to follow me on YouTube. I'm going to post this live. I post most of the lives, so you can go back and watch them if you want. But, you know, one of the best things that you can do for yourself, whether you are experiencing a really challenging health diagnosis or not, is to learn the skill to get yourself from low vibration to high. So in your case, when you talk about your husband and you say that he's nasty, let's just put aside the fact that you're saying you know that this feeling of wanting him gone, right? Like not put it aside, but let's put aside the fact that he's not gone. That's kind of what I mean. Put aside the circumstance and let's just focus on the feeling of what's coming up towards your husband, because that's what you need to work on passing. And regardless of whether he's there or whether he's not there, it's your responsibility to take accountability for that emotion that's coming up, for what is coming up for him. And the other reason I say this is because when we talk about the high vibration, and I said this a little earlier, the freedom that we want to experience, the freedom is on the other side of the hard emotions. The freedom, and I'm a firm believer that forgiveness is a part of experiencing this freedom, because when you do not forgive somebody, they still have control over you, because again, they have the control to make you go low into low vibration. So I know there's a lot of people have a lot of feelings about whether you need to forgive or not. I don't think anybody needs to forgive. Of course not. It's everybody's personal choice. My personal experience and feeling about that is that no, of course nobody needs to forgive anybody, but I don't think that if you haven't forgiven, then you will ever feel fully free. And I think if you want to feel fully free and be in high vibration state of peace, you do need to do that. And let me explain what forgiveness means, because there's a lot of misconceptions about forgiveness too. Forgiveness means that so the way that I see it is that it actually has nothing to do with the other person. You're not actually forgiving them. What you're actually doing is taking all of the focus about what they did or what they said, you know, how they hurt you, and you're actually putting it back on yourself to feel all of the hard feelings that come up for you. So it's more so you're centering yourself. So you center yourself and your emotions rather than centering the emotions, or I should say, rather than centering what they did and how they hurt you, right? So we're bringing the focus back to ourselves. And so I would probably suggest that you look at the anger and rage practice, perhaps, for your husband, because when you actually feel your feelings and you validate them, and I would say also look at the feeling of feelings practice, because it's important that once you get through the anger and rage, what's always under anger is always deep hurt and deep sadness and disappointment. So we need to be able to feel the anger, and we need a practice to feel the anger. And then we also need to be able to feel and validate what's underneath that, which is a deep, deep sense of hurt. And that's the stuff that the anger masks, because that stuff feels way too vulnerable. Because it feels easier to stay angry at somebody instead of admitting how badly they've hurt you, because when you admit how badly they've hurt you, what does that mean? Maybe that means something terrible, like, I don't know, whatever you think that might mean, that they're going to leave you, that you're going to leave, that it's going to cause a big blow up in your, that you need to blow up your life, or maybe you're not even afraid of that. I don't know. Or maybe you're afraid that they won't leave. But it's like a radical honesty to yourself. That's what those two practices help you do. Feeling of feelings and feeling anger and rage. They help you to be radically honest with yourself about the feelings that are coming up, putting aside the present circumstances and whatever's going on. We're actually just going to take time to focus on ourselves and what's coming up for ourselves. The other thing that I would say, my dear, and I don't know if you're still here, but this is, I think, an important message for anyone, is that the relationship between your husband and your daughter is their responsibility. It doesn't mean the hard feelings won't come up for you because you're choosing to do it differently. You're making different decisions than perhaps your husband is making. You're choosing to see hard things. But your relationship with your daughter is yours. Your relationship with your husband is yours. But their relationship, you need to remove yourself. And by that, I mean, allow them to navigate the challenging emotions that come up towards each other. And you focus on the challenging emotions that are coming up for you toward your husband. And I don't know if you have any towards your daughter at this point, but that's your responsibility. But you have to also learn to let go of wanting their relationship to be different, because it's not supposed to be different. You thinking that your husband should do the work that you're doing is just your own hurt that he's not. But it doesn't mean that he should be doing it differently, because he's not. And obviously they have something to teach each other still in this life. So you need to let them learn whatever lessons they're going to learn. And I don't know if you are like having conversations with your daughter about your husband, but you got to stop that. If you are, because again, their relationship is not your business. And that's where I think we get into a little bit of like unhealthy family dynamics in a lot, and this happens a lot. And I know I have personal experience with it as well, but you can't, it's not really helpful as the mother to be engaging with your daughter about her relationship with her father, no matter whether you're with him or not. And no matter whether you're with him or not, make it a priority for you to get to peace through these practices, perhaps through Joe Dispenza's meditations or whatever other way that you're doing it. But your unrest about their relationship is not going to help you stay in high vibration. So you've got to, kind of like I was saying earlier, we got to cut the news. We got to like stop watching the news, stop engaging with things that bring us low vibration. It's the same thing. You got to stop engaging with like conversations about how nasty your husband is. Because keeping that type of thing going, that's not going to keep you in a state of peace. That's not going to help anything. And you haven't commented, so I'm not sure if you're still here, but I'm hoping that other people are listening and learning from that because it's true. You have to like butt out of people's relationships with each other. And sometimes it's hard in a family, especially when there's like codependence or when like healthy boundaries are not existent. But you've got to let other people have other people navigate their relationships with each other, and you just focus on your relationship with each individual person. And they're going to look totally different. And you could have a totally different relationship with your mother versus your father, even if they're together, because they're two different people and they have two very different lessons to teach you. It doesn't mean that you don't take responsibility for the hard feelings that come up that maybe they're not doing the work that you want them to do. Of course, that hurts. Yeah, Purple Hearts is definitely hard watching my parents. I want to defend my mother so bad all the time. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. And I think that's a part of this whole experience of setting boundaries with people. Um, it really does come back to your peace, you choosing your peace every time. You know, I think sometimes when people like within a family dynamic that doesn't have boundaries or is codependent, um, a lot of times like gossip feels like connection to people because they don't know any different. So there's a lot of like talking behind people's backs or like spreading information about other people when, it's not really appropriate, that type of thing. Or speaking about other people, when they're not there. And I think that what's healthy for you, like, it's not healthy to try to stop that because it's like, you're not going to stop it. And you don't have to stop it. You have to feel your hard feelings about it. If you feel like upset or angry at it, your responsibility is to feel the feelings about it. And like I always say this, once you feel the hard feelings and validate the hard feelings, you'll get to a place where you're just like, oh, I don't need to change it. And then once you set boundaries where like, okay, these certain people perhaps like that do gossip or that do, make comments maybe about your mom or whatever, like maybe I just don't see them that often. But it doesn't mean that like, okay, I'll set a boundary that like I'll see this person a few times a year or whatever it is. And then when I do see them, perhaps they do that same thing. They say the thing or they gossip or something. But by that point, I've taken so much space from them. I don't take it as personally, but I do have a plan for how I react. So when they do that thing that is triggering, like make a comment or criticism or gossip, I know what my plan of action is. So I make a promise to myself that when somebody says something or when something comes up, that I change the subject. I walk away. I um kind of casually, perhaps. I think this is the key. Instead of reacting emotionally to that person, if they say something about somebody and I react and try to defend them, really provide a that's never really going to encourage somebody to change their perspective or change what they do. Compassion is actually the thing that is always going to change. It's always going to be the thing that has the best chance of changing somebody is if you have compassion for them. So if you can have compassion for this person that they don't actually know how to process the hard feelings that they have. So that's why they're saying this thing because they don't know another way to process it. Perhaps you can find a way to have compassion for it. And then you don't need to defend anything, but maybe you say something like, well, I don't really see that. I don't really see that in her, and then change the subject, right? Like, so anyway, or like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's an energy behind it. Like when somebody says something and you react emotionally and like defensively, they have control over you. But when you've taken enough space from them, when you developed the practices so that you feel your feelings and validate them, then you can approach these situations in such a different energy. It's not an energy of like hatred or anger or defense. It's an energy of just like, well, that's how they process things and they don't know another way. And so you can approach it with compassion and just speak your truth, but casually, without all the energy behind it. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like you just kind of say, like, if somebody says something, negative about your mom, you just say, well, that's really not my experience of it. Or, you know, or or something like, well, I know you think that, but that's not how I experience it, or that's not true for me. Um, or, I don't know if you've asked them to stop, but you can do that. But again, that's not a boundary. So it's like knowing how you're going to react. What's the promise that you're going to make to yourself when they do say the thing ultimately that has triggered you? And actually, I want to tie that to what I said a little while ago about forgiveness, because the way that you know that you've gotten to forgiveness, and forgiveness is not just like this place that we reach and then we're just there and we're like good and we're at peace. It's like forgiveness is a journey, and some days you'll feel like, yeah, like I really feel it, and then other days you're going to be like, I fucking hate them today because probably because they triggered you. And then you'll have to work through that and get yourself back up. That's why you need the tool to get yourself back up. But what I want to say is that when you feel compassion for that person, when you're able to feel compassion for that person, you know that you've gotten to forgiveness. And the only way that you can get there, the only way that you can get to compassion for them is if you first feel compassion for yourself and for what's coming up for you. If you first do the feeling feelings practice because you love yourself way too much to sit in anger and resentment. And because every time you're triggered, you may not know how to get to forgiveness, but you know you want to get to it because you know forgiveness is freedom. Compassion for that person is freedom. Way to get to compassion, feel your feelings, validate your feelings, and it comes naturally after that. You don't have to try to forgive someone. It's not really about trying to forgive somebody. You could want to forgive them, but it's about showing up for yourself. And then forgiveness naturally comes when you're feeling your feelings, when you're seeing, hearing, and understanding yourself, when you're showing up. Then the forgiveness comes. You don't have to do anything to get there. You'll just you'll just all of a sudden realize, oh, like I can have compassion for them. Hmm. And typically you can have compassion for them because you've taken so much space from them too, that you're not constantly being re-triggered. And you've gotten more clear on your boundaries with them so that you're not seeing them all the time or interacting with them. You know what that means? That means you're learning to trust yourself. That means you're learning to see, hear, and understand yourself so that you don't need them to see, hear, and understand you. You don't actually need to tell them all the ways that they've hurt you, and you don't actually need them to apologize because you're seeing, hearing, and understanding yourself. So you don't need anything from them. And when you don't need anything from the other person, and when they don't have power to hurt you anymore, then you can actually see them as a person who's really wounded, and you can have compassion for that. Once you've taken your power back and you feel empowered in yourself to show up, and you don't need them to do anything differently. And you can see how that's an incredibly powerful thing. And I'll leave it with how I started this session today, which is that relationships are one of the most powerful tools for self-actualization. And I think I just described how. So Purple Hearts said, that clicked. I need to get myself safe before I try to make my mom safe. Absolutely. Giving you some little snaps for that. And I'm definitely not at forgiveness. Like, do it for myself first. That's it, my dear. That's it. All right, my darlings. Thank you so much for engaging tonight. This was like a really great live and a really great conversation that brought out so many things. And I really appreciate you all being here. Yeah, thank you, my dear. Yeah, thank you, Shane, for the comment. I'm sending you all so much love and so much light. As I said, I do have my YouTube channel that's linked in my profile. You can check there for the feeling of feelings practice, the feeling of anger and rage practice, energy protection practice. Start with feeling of feelings and feeling anger and rage. Start there. And thank you, my dear. Thank you, Green Tea Shot. And I love you all so much. And thank you for your engagement. I will see you next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time.